Questions about all the stuff we just covered. I wanted to just give you a grounding about how we got to the idea of karma in all the ACI courses and why it's vital to understanding how things function. No questions? No wrong. Come on.
Where's Shiva?
You should. But I don't understand.
She should call in with a question.
So Abhidharma, and we'll disambiguate the word. Is that a word?
Strategery.
That one? The word in just a second. It's one of the first forms of Buddhism in India. And so it's, for those of you who care or who know the difference between Hinayana and Mahayana, it's originally a Hinayana idea. So and we'll cover why that makes a difference in a second. So for those of you who care, it came from the detailer school of Vaibhasika school. For those that care, there's 4 main schools of Indian Buddhism. The Buddha taught these ideas in 4 different ways, not to confuse you, but to help you or get people with whatever capacity they can grasp onto these ideas in whatever their metaphors are to get these ideas. So they're not contradictory, they're just stacked one on top of the other. So Mahayana, which is most of the Southeast Asian Buddhist cultures, their main goal is nirvana, to reach nirvana. And so they talk about emptiness as no self. That's one of the main differences. And Mahayana, Maha meaning...
Sorry, you said the first one, Mahayana.
Oh, did I say Mahayana? Sorry, Hinayana, I meant, is lesser be equal, meaning you want to reach nirvana, a state of permanent cessation of suffering. I'm really dumbing it down, it's much more complex than that. And so the goal from Hinayanas is nirvana, as opposed to Buddhahood for Mahayana, who's a higher vehicle. Yeah? So the difference of the ultimate goal is you can reach a state of permanent cessation of suffering and bliss. So you're in nirvana. Yeah? This is for a Hinayana, a lesser practitioner, if you like, or a lesser scope. It's a vehicle, Hinayana. And the school that we're studying, karma, comes from a book originally by the detailists, Abhidharmists, that talk about emptiness. Instead of saying emptiness, they talk about it as no self. And the goal of that is nirvana. If you were doing that in a Mahayana context, in the Buddhism that went from India to Tibet and China and Japan, the greater vehicle, nirvana becomes Buddhahood. It's still the goal. It's just nirvana with omniscience, for those of you who know the difference. And instead of talking about no self, it's no self-nature, which means emptiness. Yeah? So it's the same stuff, it's just slightly different words. So for those of you who care, we are now, if you're in a monastery and learning this stuff, the abbots or the people teaching you this context will say to you, you have to put your Hinayana hat on. You have to put the Vaibhashika school's hat on and not talk about emptiness and not talk about Vaitya. You'd have to pretend that you're in the Hinayanas because you're trying to learn that whole method of what the Buddha taught. And then in 5 more years you can go into a Mahayana school. So for those of you who care. So it was... the main text that everybody uses is called the Abhidharma Kosha. It's been translated into French and then from the French to English, and you'll be able to find it if you look at it, and it's really hard to read. Yeah? And so it's called Abhidharma Kosha, and in Sanskrit, Abhidharma, Abhi means up to something or towards something or approaching a thing, Abhi. Dharma, what's Dharma? Remember the Dharma jewel? What's Dharma? Good. Chu in Tibetan. Oh, that's good. You put Abhi is Nungpa. Thank you for that. And Dharma is Chu. And Kosha is Tzu. Yeah? In Tibetan. So the Sanskrit is Abhi Dharma. Kosha. In Tibetan is Nungpa Chutsu. And the meaning of Abhi is up to something or approaching something or towards something. What's the meaning of Dharma? We talked about this in ACI 4, when we got the explanation of all existing things. Remember, we did this beautiful division of everything without exception that exists in the universe. Changing things, not changing things. Physical things, within changing things. Physical things, non-physical things. Yeah? Within physical things, within mental things. Yeah, non-physical things. What's a dharma? What's a dharma in the normal sense of the word?
An existing thing.
Good. In this sense of the word, it means existing thing. Yeah. It's what's the ultimate of all out of all the things that exist. Out of every single thing that exists, what's the ultimate dharma? What's the biggest dharma? What's the most dharma? The highest dharma? Emptiness. The thing that belongs to all of them. Yeah. So in this case, it means existing thing. Yeah. But it's implying emptiness, wisdom. And kosha means the treasure house or the treasury or the place where all the gold is kept, all the jewels and so on. So the Abhidharma kosha is the place where all those jewels are kept. So what jewels? I'll tell you about that in a second. It was the Abhidharma kosha was written by Master Vasubandhu around 350 AD. For those of you who have done ACI 1, 2 and 3, these characters become central and very important because they wrote the majority of the Buddhist canons. So the Buddha taught at that time, people could remember instantly, and they would almost word for word, they say, would translate the teachings of the Buddha, and people pop and get enlightened here and there. And at some point they had this conference where they all said, well, I heard him say this, and I heard him say that, and I heard him say that. And that's where the sutras come from. So the sutras, the words of the Buddha, are the direct memory of his disciples written down. Out of that, when he talked about nirvana, in this case, yeah, all existing things, there was a collection of 7 books on all these existing things. Master Vasubandhu in 350 AD grabbed all those 7 collections of these sutras, the Buddha taught this stuff, and collected it into a treasure house of these 7 books, a condensed version of those 7 books. Since then, the books are lost, the original 7. So we're only left with the Abhidharma kosha. I'm not sure if it's in Pali, I don't think so from my understanding, but Sanskrit into Pali and then into Tibetan and Chinese and the rest, and that's how it went. So Abhidharma means up to Nirvana, the treasure house. So up to that wisdom that gets you to Nirvana. So what's the wisdom that gets you to Nirvana? That if you were in the Vaibhashika school, you would say, understanding
no self.
No self. Yeah, good. Thank you, just testing. So I told you about the series of books. I told you about, that might be in your homework, by the way, well, the words mean Abhidharma kosha, hence why I'm telling you. And we're studying a commentary by the first of the Dalai Lamas, a gentleman called, is that up there?
No.
Yeah.
Yes.
Galway Gendu Drew. Yeah.
Yes.
And his commentary is called Tarlam Selje, which means illumination on the path to freedom. So this is the thing that shines the light as you get from here to Nirvana. It's important to know where you get these ideas from. I need to tell you that this is not stuff that I've made up, Geshe Michael's made up. In fact, in Buddhist training, you're not allowed to make up stuff. You're supposed to get an understanding of what you've been taught and then pass that on. Yeah? Which leads me to my out. Everything I'm telling you, to the best of my ability, I will make my biggest effort not to muddle it up. But I've taken this information, I've internalized it through meditation and practice and lots of failure, and got whatever insight I've got. So I might pass on to you some bad takes on these, some bad habits on these, and I hope I don't. So it's important for you to get these ideas and say, well, does that make sense to me? Can I prove this idea? Can I test it? Can I break it? Yeah, so I'll do my best to try and transmit to you the lung, or the essence of these teachings that came from Geshe Michael and his teacher in this tradition, all the way back to Jetson Kappa, who was the teacher of the first Dalai Lama, and all the way back to the Buddha. And it's, as you study and teach, you're taught to do that, and I'll try my very best, and I'll do my out now that if I make a mistake, I deeply apologize and I'm so sorry and blah blah blah. Yeah. So he wrote an Illumination on the Path to Freedom, a commentary on the Abhidhamma Kosha by Master Vasubandhu. For those that care, Master Vasubandhu was one of the core writers of the entire Buddhist canon that are used right now in the monasteries, with his brother, what's his name?
Master Asanga.
Master Asanga. Yeah. So for those of you who are shaping up in your mind or are interested in the characters that are highly illuminated beings that took these insights and made them real and then started teaching it themselves and writing down what they were taught, etc., Master Asanga and Master Vasubandhu are core players in the 350 ADs. They were both sons of an ex-nun. There was this nun at the time who was said to have clairvoyance, and she saw in her vision that she should have two sons that would pass down these Buddhist teachings they weren't called Buddhist teachings, they were like realizations, they were teachings, they were the essence of knowing. And so she derobed, she stopped being a nun, and she had one son by a king, I think, and one son by a holy man, I can't remember, Vasubandhu and Asanga. And together the majority of the stuff that is learned in the monasteries comes from those two, and the commentaries upon those, who were the closest beings to the people that actually heard the Buddha and passed on the sutras, and as they got lost over time. So that's important.
Were they within the Gelugpa lineage, or?
At that time, Gelugpa didn't exist. So there's, it gets complicated. This is a trap. That's something I try not to do too much. There's 4 schools that the Buddha taught. So there are 4 schools in Indian Buddhism. Over the however many years the Buddha taught, was it 50 years? Yeah, that he did the cycle of the Dharma. He taught the same stuff 4 times in 4 different ways. Each time saying, oh, I mean this, I meant that, I meant that. Not contradicting the previous, but giving a slightly different insight. Those 4 schools are not the same schools, the same 4 schools that exist now in Tibetan Buddhism. Yeah? That's a completely different thing. So in Tibetan Buddhism now you have the Gelugpa, which began around Lama Tsongkhapa, and then you have Sakyas, Nyingmas, Kalabhus, etc. These are lineages. You were in Nepal with us. They don't talk that much about, I'm in this lineage and I'm in that lineage. It's all wisdom and it's all practice. Just different masters teaching different people. So the main difference is this Hinayana Mahayana, which understand the core teachings in a slightly different way. Both ways helpful to get insights. And once you get one, you move on to the next. I wouldn't get too hung up on that. Okay, good. There are 2 types of Abhidharma, and please share with me and say Sherab.
Sherab.
And Jedram.
Jedram.
Good. So Sherab, does anyone remember the word Sherab? What's that? Have you seen it before? Sherab? Wisdom. Who said that?
Flavia.
Oh, Claudia. Wisdom. So this Abhidharma, stuff contained in here, pertains mainly to the 3 unstained higher knowledges. Yeah? So the 3 unstained higher knowledges. What this means, for those of you who studied before, there are the 5 paths. What are the 5 paths? Sorry to give you a list of lists.
Path of accumulation.
Renunciation.
Preparation. Accumulation, seeing, habituation, and no more learning.
Okay, so let's look at those 3, the last 3 of those 5 paths. These are the steps that you take from studying you're getting insight. So you get renunciation, you learn about emptiness. Then the third path, you enter what's called the path of seeing. You have a direct experience of emptiness, or no self in this school. And that is called the path of seeing. This is the first of the three things that are the higher knowledge of Shera. This is an unstained wisdom in Abhidharma. This is the stuff we're going to study, the stuff that takes us to Nirvana. The path of seeing is one of those things. Then the next path, once you get an insight into the ultimate nature of reality, you have a direct perception of no self or emptiness, you then begin to habituate your mind to say, I'm in a world that doesn't operate that way. In other words, I've figured out that water doesn't produce apple trees. Oh my God, there were seeds under the ground. Now you begin to investigate and habituate yourself into finding the seeds. Oh, that's an apple seed, this is a banana seed, this is... All of a sudden you've got insight into your world that is different to the way you used to understand it. This is called the path of habituation. No more can you ever pour water. Once you know directly that it's the seeds that produce the trees and not the water, metaphor. Once you have a visceral experience of the ultimate nature of reality in meditation, you see emptiness directly, you come out of that experience, you realize inside of you, not up here, in here, you know, a knowing the ultimate nature of things. Water does not produce my reality of trees. It's this thing called seeds underneath that does. Once you get that, you then begin to habituate your patterns, your bad, mistaken habits of pouring water onto everything to try and get things, and you start looking for seeds. This is called the path of habituation. You begin to see cause and effect in your world, and you no longer believe that the suffering comes from the punch. But you still get punched, and you still have the habit to think that that's where it came from, but you know for sure there's a seed in there somewhere. Does that make sense? So that's the second path.
We're mixing metaphors here.
We're mixing metaphors.
There's punches and apple seeds
and all these things. Makes sense to me.
Okay.
And then lastly, the path of no more learning, which is the fifth of the path. You have integrated all that understanding, you have habituated that understanding, it becomes your reality. You are abiding in that understanding. You are in Buddhahood or Nirvana in this case. So that's Shera. That's a synonym for wisdom. That means high knowledge. That's the main of the Abhidharmas. That's called the unstained Abhidharma. That's the stuff that's contained in this book. The secondary, or the things that follow, is what Jedram means. These are the accessories to these wisdoms, and this is things like knowledge and learning and meditation and the books and so on. So understand that if Abhidharma means the treasure house of knowledge or the treasure house of wisdom or the things that get you to Nirvana, it's not the books that get you to Nirvana. It's not the words that you're hearing from my lips that get you to Nirvana. It's something else that you internalize that this is Abhidharma. When you have these realizations, this is Abhidharma. So that might be important if you get asked that in the homework. So there are 8 chapters to the Abhidharma, and you will be asked these questions. It's a fascinating thing. It's like an encyclopedia of all existing things. And there's a logic to the way the ideas are presented, and you'll understand why I'm talking about this in A Course of Karma. So Master Vasubandhu gathered the main 7 books on all existing knowledge and created a treasure house called Abhidharma Kosha, and it's broken down into 8 chapters. The first is a category of all existence. So everything under existence. And it categorizes and divides the entire universe. Yeah? The next one they call the powers, and for those of you who have studied before, there's the sense powers of the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, etc. The physical element that lets you differentiate light, differentiate sound. These are some of the powers, but there's also some more powers. And it describes in here that every sentient being, every being under existence has some powers, these powers. So feminine is a power, and masculinity is a power, so the male power. So it's trying to understand the universe. Abhidharma Kosha, the treasure house of all existing knowledge, begins by saying, well, here is the entire universe. And it begins to describe in the next chapter, I think, the one after, the next chapter, the suffering world. He talks about all the realms of existence, from the highest, biggest universes to the tiniest particles, and he gives them names, and it gives you measurements and so on. So that's chapter 3, it's called the suffering world. And then chapter 4 talks about karma, what produces these worlds. So that's the logic between 3 and 4. It's as if I'm explaining all these worlds that exist, what produce them, and so they go into an in-depth understanding of karma. And this is where we're going to get the root information about what we'll cover over the next 12 weeks. And we'll cover about how karma is stored, how karma is perpetuated, where does it sit, how does it grow, how does it stop, can it stop, why is karma the cause of everything, why is it the mind that carries karma. It will explain all these things in detail. It will explain these things, and it also, in this chapter, it disproves the creator theory. It says there is no creator. It's just karma. So it goes through this thing. In chapter 5, we talk about the mental afflictions, or the negative thoughts that are turning and churning in your consciousness. So the karmas that produce negativity in order for you to slash them. And then it talks about, because that's what motivates karmas that don't work in this world. The mental afflictions or the negative states of mind, not understanding how you do things, are what produce the perpetual suffering. So you look at that, and then it jumps on to the next chapter, which is person and path, and that refers to how to escape suffering. What do you do to turn off those karmas, and how do you produce the ceasing of suffering? And then it goes on to wisdom, which is the mental stuff, goes into meditation, and mostly will be focused on chapter 4 around karma. Lastly, I need to tell you that you might be in your homework too. There are 4 requirements for any Buddhist book to be an authentic book, to be a book worth learning. And so the Tibetans have categorized what's worth learning and what's not in the Buddha talks. But the first is Jula, say Jula.
Jula.
The next part is required for a book to be an authentic Dharma book is Gupa.
Gupa.
The last one say Nigu. Nigu. And lastly is Drawa. Great. So the first one is that the Juja means it must have a meaningful topic. It's got to be worth studying. And so the Abhidharma Kosha is worth studying because it's got the content that can get you free of suffering. It's meaningful. There's a good reason for it. Gupa, it must have a purpose. It must have a strong purpose. And the purpose is to get you to understand the seeds that will produce wisdom. Nigu means it must go to an ultimate goal. So out of all the things that a book could talk about, you could be talking about, I don't know, the flavor of ice cream, you could talk about the color of cat's hairs, etc. The ultimate goal here of this book is freedom from suffering for all beings caught in the same shtick that we're stuck in. So it sort of qualifies for that as well. And then the fourth requirement for any Buddhist book to be authentic is that it must be a logical correlation between the first two. That the meaning of the book is tied to the purpose of the book, so they're not talking about separate things, and it must direct you to an ultimate goal. The ultimate goal is either nirvana or Buddhahood, freedom from suffering. And so any Buddhist book would be classified under these things. And you should know this because there are so many books out there that you could be spending your time reading. And you should be able to evaluate for yourself, is this going to help me really? Is it just some more stuff that I'm reading, or is this really going to help me? So the Abhidharma Kosha holds inside of it a treasure house of information about understanding the ultimate nature of how you get your apple trees and not banana trees. It wasn't the water. It explains in detail how that production of your experience of your world, of me, of my suffering, of my happiness, of my depression, of my loneliness, of my goodness, of my joy, it's not outside of you. There was no one that made it for you. They can't control it for you. No one can help. It's in you. That's freedom. That's meaningful. If you figure out how you can turn every single experience you're having into a step towards ultimate. It's not easy work. Like the person downstairs. She's really suffering. Yeah. So that's it. Do we have any questions? That's it for class 1. I invite you to come and listen and spend time thinking about the 4 laws of karma, how to stop bad karma, how to grow karma, how to plant the seeds for the ultimate realizations, etc. I invite you to try and investigate your world through these ideas for the next 12 weeks. In that respect, like I began in the class, this is a radical idea in this world. We operate in this world thinking the punch caused my suffering. Watering the ground produces trees of a specific type. We've got it upside down. In that respect, the Buddha was extremely different to the materialists and to the creationists, which are the two views we hold. And there's freedom in that. So I invite you to that. Any questions? Going once, going twice?
Can we just say that if anyone is new and doesn't know that there's a website to go to, it's called acidharma.org. And then for course 5, you can find there's reading from the class, there is homework. When we come next time, we'll do a little quiz. It's a very low pressure, just way to see if you retained anything from doing the homework. So maybe you can give a plug about doing homeworks and quizzes, but it's self-directed, so go to the web, find the information yourself. Again, it's acidharma.org, and this is course 5.
Yeah, so the other thing is, if you're interested, next week I'll take your email addresses and we'll email that link to everybody.
Okay.
But next week, I think you've decided you're going to bring the quizzes and homework. So we'll hand out from next week quizzes and homework. So pretend that this week is the beginning. Next week we.
It is the beginning. There is nothing to do. Yeah.
Well, there's homework last one. Yeah.
But we turned it in next time.
Yeah. So that's it. Thank you. Enjoy. See you in a week.
We're gonna do
a quick dedication. Ready?
Ready. Sashi Puki Jishin Metotron Vira Blingshi Nindegim Padi Sange Shindu Mite Uwagi Drokun Namdakshin Laju Parsho Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamniryatayami Gewa Die Kyokun Sunam Yeshe Sotsoshin Sunam Yeshe Vajunwe Dampaduni Topasho.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you for teaching.